Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Reset Air Accredited Professional Training Series. My name is Anjanette Green, and I'm the Director of Standards Development for Reset. And I'm going to be your instructor, taking you through the Reset Air training modules to help you on your way to becoming an accredited professional. So just a little bit of housekeeping to make sure that you understand how this is going to progress for you on your path to becoming an AP. The training series has gone through a little bit of change since its first version. So there are now compulsory modules, and these are the web-based modules that I'm going to be taking you through that are required. They're free, but they are required in order for you to then be prepared for an on-site technical exam. And that practicum is a paid exam that you will take on site. It's administered by a Reset professional trainer, and it's proctored by them with a time limit. So the on-site practicum requires you to assess a commercial interior project as well as a core and shell project and apply the Reset Air standards to them. And although these are hypothetical projects that you'll be receiving, they're really based on real-world scenarios and projects that you can then apply the standard to. And it requires that you would review it as a project would submit it to you. So this is going to be understanding the project's individual conditions, the project team's narrative as submitted to you as an AP, and review and execute calculations to create a final deployment plan. Then, in addition to the practical exam, there's also a written exam, and that's required that you pass as well. So the online exam is something that you can take on your own time. It could be considered open book because you are welcome to open the standard as you take it, but it's really going to ask you to be familiar enough because it's a comprehensive test on all of the subjects that are going to be covered in these webinar modules. And with that, the modules are designed to cover what you see here. We'll be going over the history and the introduction of Reset, its mission and intent, the Reset approach, target pollutants, Reset Air accredited monitors, as well as accredited data providers. And then we'll cover some innovations, case studies, and talk about the return of investment for pursuing the standard and what that means for project teams. So we'll jump into the history and a brief introduction. So Reset is exactly what you see here. It's the world's first sensor-based and performance-driven indoor air quality standard and certification program. And it's an acronym. So it stands for Regenerative, Ecological, Social, and Economic Targets. And all of these themes are going to be discussed a little bit further on as we go through the training modules. But it's just important to understand that that's what Reset stands for. But before we do any of that and go into such detail, I think I'd like to talk about the history of the program and a little bit about how it came to pass. So our history is rooted in China. Back in 2001 in Shanghai, it was really an effort of a group of concerned architects and concerned designers, both foreign and local, who were really aggressively trying to solve some truly difficult problems of unhealthy buildings and unhealthy interiors. And you can imagine back in 2001 how difficult this must have been. There were concepts of green design, a sustainable design that was largely being imported from the West. It was not something that was easily understood in China. On top of that, huge lack of resources. And I think that this is still an ongoing problem. Lack of resources is a problem that we face here in the West as well. But certainly in 2001, we just did not have anywhere near the resources that we have now that we've come into 2018, but still an ongoing theme. And then on top of it, expensive. I think that most people would sympathize in understanding if you're trying to do something differently. If you're trying to invent a new way, this tends to have a price tag on it. So trying to do things with a green or sustainable intent was largely out of range for most people with their costs. So in 2009, the very first iteration of an attempt to draft some rules around how do we specify better materials and how do we calculate indoor air quality to ensure that we have better interiors or safe and healthy spaces for our families and our children, for our employees, for all the people that we actually in architecture and design for. How do we do that? So the first version was developed. And I want to talk for just 1 second about the importance to appreciate and understand this East-West relationship, or rather, in actual fact, an opposite perspective when it comes to green design. The East has had a 5,000 plus year old history of health. This runs deep in the culture. And I think that if the West hadn't introduced sustainable building design, the way that we think about the environment and almost a separate from self kind of concept, I think the East would have developed what would be called healthy design rather than green design. So in the West, we've really had this concept of sustainability. And if you know anymore, we don't really use that word sustainability anymore, because it's now outdated. But if you look at the East, this concept of health and regeneration has been a part of their ethos since, I think, as far back as anybody can see in their history, written or spoken or otherwise. So it's a really interesting thing to note. And I just like to give a nod to it before we go further into the training, because it's really a deep part of where Reset has come from. So getting back to the point, what we have seen in the West is exactly what this graphic is trying to show. Previously, in most certification programs, it was something like a project meeting environmental criteria like recycled content or using FSC wood, having energy and water saving technologies in place. And then the building would get a plaque on the wall, and that would be the end of it. And while protecting the environment is, of course, a noble cause, it's an absolute necessary pursuit, what this was creating was a generation of buildings that were kind of forgetting a really important piece. And that is, of course, the occupant, human health. So up until recently, certifications were not addressing human health. This was largely ignored. Now, fast forward to today, there is a big shift in nearly all the certifications that we see, both for the built environment as well as for individual product certifications, to have some kind of criteria that relates to human health or relates to protecting human health. So whether it be material ingredient transparency or requirements of a fitness and active design program, or innovations in cleaner interior air or water, most of these programs are aware of the importance of addressing the occupant as much as equal to protecting the environment. But this is what Reset has been focused on all along. We've really been trying to address this question as, how effective is this building at keeping me healthy? How effective is this building operationally in keeping me safe every day? So Reset is 100% interested in what happens to your building, your environment, once it's functioning and operational. So what you see in this image is this dotted line. We have up until now not had a standard that actually held you responsible for a healthy building in its operational phase. So the missing pieces were a standard as well as something that gave you enough data and feedback in a reliable way to close this loop and complete that circle. So with Reset, we're really proud and I think celebratory about the fact that we don't stop with the ribbon cutting when the project team has completed the design, but rather that's when our work begins. So really what we are is we're pairing standards with data, a way for the data and the metrics from that data to fill in those gaps. And I like this idea of standards and data in terms of an elegant way to describe Reset, especially maybe to those who've never heard of it before, is that Reset is both a standard and a certification. And because Reset Air has codified critical components for how to monitor a space and how to report that data, the standard is really nimble. And we'll see that it's easily adopted into other certification programs or even to company standards because of this. So again, because it's operational, the focus is on the operations of the building, the monitoring and reporting the indoor air quality results, it can be used as a tool. And this can help achieve multiple goals, either credit-wise in different green building criteria, or again, on a case-by-case basis for companies that have an indoor air quality or indoor environmental quality program. So what is Reset Air? And I am being so bold as to borrow pages exactly from the standard. One, because you need to know the standard and how it's written and what the contents are intimately anyway. But I think this is a really consistent way so everybody really understands what is Reset's intent. What is it trying to do? Reset is targeting the environmental health of occupants, starting with the people and indoor air quality. Indoor air quality changes continuously. And this is really important for everyone to understand. Spaces are dynamic, and what we're really trying to look for are the impacts of CO2, CO, particulate matter, and VOCs, which is your chemical off-gassing. And because we're the first sensor-based and performance-driven indoor air quality program, we do require continuous monitoring so that the data can be communicated to the project occupants, as well as visitors that would be included through a mobile device and other visual displays and or a visual display. And then with that, we have a set of standards that helps you with the installation, the calibration, the reporting, all of the things that would tie into how do you get credible data in a way that is responsible, in a way that people can understand. And so how does it work? Well, I'm not going to read all of this because I think you should be able enough to read this for yourselves. But in a nutshell, we're rethinking and simplifying indoor air quality by looking at standards that help you communicate the parameters that you see on the side: PM 2.5, TVOC, CO2, CO temperature, and humidity. But we're not asking that you have a checklist or a prescribed path or anything that has you check boxes. We really want people to understand that the standard is looking for projects to submit on a case-by-case basis. We understand completely that every project is slightly different. So this gives you a lot of latitude to understand intimately how is your project being used? What are the densities? How is your HVAC design? Because every single one of those is going to be a different case. So to apply the intent of the standard is what we're looking for, and we in no way want to squash anyone's ideas for innovation or creating exceptional designs. That's your job, and as architects and designers, we want to honor that. But we still want to hold you to meeting these thresholds for the pollutants that we think are of concern. And so again, in order to do all of that, the standards have to be pretty comprehensive. So we have the standards for core and shell and commercial interiors. And that, of course, is where you come in as an accredited professional. You are an independent professional that's specifically trained to guide these projects through feasibility studies, as well as to help them deploy according to the standard. We also then have monitor standards to make sure that you have credible devices in your projects, and we would only allow for a grade A or a grade B for a Reset project. But we have A, B, and C here because the monitor standards are important. It's really important to understand what that grade C is, which is a consumer grade device would not be applicable for a Reset project. And again, we'll talk about those as we progress through the modules for training. And the last piece here is a data provider standard. So the Reset Cloud collects data from each of these projects, it analyzes it, and then it reports it in a credible way. And again, we'll be talking about that in a dedicated module so that you understand what those are. So a recap of what the family of standards really looks like is all of what you see here. There's the standard for core and shell, the standard for commercial interiors, the standard for accredited monitors, for data providers, the methodology for data analytics, and the test procedure for accredited monitors. Now, as an AP, you're not going to be required to know all the content of these standards, but you will be responsible for understanding the core and shell and commercial interiors standards specifically, because that, of course, is where an AP would be necessary with their expertise to ensure that a program is following the standard and complying with the intent. So although it's important to understand the entire family and how they work and why they exist, you will be tested on the core and shell and commercial interiors standards specifically. So there's various applicable building typologies that you can apply the standard to, and I'm showing a couple here. But what's really important to take away is that for commercial interiors and for core and shell, the reset standard can be applied for either new or existing building stock. We are currently not optimized for multifamily residential or residential. However, we are continually pushing the envelope on the realm of data monitoring and reporting for all of the built environment. And because of this, there will always be considerations for projects that don't quite fit into the CI or CS profiles that you see here. So don't be deterred if your project doesn't quite fit under these typologies, but instead we'd like to hear from you. We're always working on pilot projects and case studies to bring more building typologies into the Reset Air certification process. So we definitely like to hear from you, and you can reach out to the team at Reset Build or to me personally using my email that's on the first slide. So again, optimized for the different project types you see here, but there are no individual standards or differences between them currently. You would apply either commercial interiors or core and shell broadly to any of these typologies. And in that theme, that is a bit of a difference from what has previously been in what we called the pre-release version of Reset. And if you've been following us at all, you're probably aware that we recently launched Reset version 2.0 as a massive collaborative effort. We learned from a lot of history, a lot of case studies, a lot of pilot projects that we are extraordinarily grateful for. But we conducted 4 formal peer review sessions that began in November of last year, 2017, and continued up until mid-January of this year, 2018. And we were so fortunate to have input from experts around the globe, representing 5 different countries and from a very wide array of professional backgrounds. So as of January 31st, 2018, we're excited to say that we launched the official version of Reset Air version 2.0. And that, of course, is a standard that we're holding teams to moving forward. And again, just to reiterate, Reset being the first standard to grow internationally out of China, we have seen rapid growth and being picked up by other countries ever since. And what does that growth exactly look like? Well, just so you can understand, in just 2 years, Reset has been adopted across the globe from 2016 to 17. The growth has been really impressive. To date, we have now, I think, over 80 projects. I think that's a little bit dated even. We've got more than that. But looking forward to 2018, we are projected to see a combination of both registered and certified projects representing close to 1.4 million square meters of real estate globally. And I think for such a quick period of time, it's incredibly impressive. And it speaks to this idea of how the standard is being picked up by international institutes and certification programs. And this is also exciting for us because we're part of an international consortium for global monitoring standards. So with this growth and development, again, it's important because for the first time, we're seeing different programs come together to harmonize their standards instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. And again, because Reset is both a certification and a standard for operational standards, it's really easily written in to other programs without contradicting what those programs are also trying to do and have laid pretty solid groundwork for. So this is really allowing for different building certification programs to use the Reset standards in a way that is fostering a unification across different platforms across the globe. And this is a great example. Fitwel, the standard that some of you are probably familiar with coming from the Center of Active Design, has in it a 6.3 indoor air quality policy. And in it, if you look at option 3 for certification documentation and requirements, Reset Air is written in as an acceptable certification meeting the 6.3 indoor air quality requirement. So just a really great example of the harmonizations, and we have a lot more of those. If you read our newsletter and our press releases, you'll be seeing more of those if you haven't already been up to date on those collaborative efforts. So again, we're just trying to make everybody's job a little bit easier. We're not reinventing something. We're helping to recognize the good work that these teams are already doing and do it in a responsible way so that your operational standards can actually be recognized. And with growth, of course, of the standard itself comes steady growth with our AP network. And we're extremely excited to see this expansion. It's been very impressive and gratifying to see our numbers to date. This heat map, it's really hard for us to even keep it up to date because we're constantly seeing new APs come on board as we continue with our training. And you can see on this, it really represents where our trusted APs are available and ready to lend their consulting services around the world. And what's more is it's really exciting to see concentrations of these APs in areas where indoor air quality expertise is really needed the most. In countries such as India and China, we're seeing exponential growth, and I believe we're going to continue to see that in years to come. So for those of you who are joining in this webinar series, you too are on your way to becoming a part of the ranks of the indoor air quality health community. And so your role as an accredited professional, what does that exactly mean? Well, in terms of Reset, it means a couple of things. You're going to be wearing several hats depending on the scenario. And the first, probably the most obvious, is being a champion for the program. And this is basically how to help inform the community at large of the importance of understanding more about indoor air quality and how it impacts human health. Informing them of how Reset is a tool that will help them in their pursuit. Second is serving as a professional consultant that you can actually bring value to a project, and probably projects that haven't heard of Reset Air. And as an AP, you open the door for added project scope, and you can charge, of course, for these consulting fees for your expertise as required. The third is serving as professional consultant. And this was perhaps when a client actually knows of Reset and they're calling upon you to be an AP. Now, as mentioned, you have to have an accredited professional on your project. That is a requirement. So often a client is already aware of Reset and they're calling upon you to actually contribute as the AP for the project. And the fourth is performing audits on behalf of Reset when called upon to do so. This is a paid position for APs, and it could happen that you are expected to look at a project to ensure that they have installed and deployed the monitors according to plan. And that would be an on-site visit, boots on the ground, where you would actually go in and ensure that the project is done according to the pre-deployment plan. And so with that, it brings us to the next module, which is mission and intent.